All right, welcome everyone to the North Split Virtual Public Landscaping and Project Updates meeting. We're glad to be with you this evening. We're going to share some information with you and give you the opportunity to ask us some questions as well. So the meeting format, we're going to have a presentation with two speakers. You have the opportunity to ask questions during the presentation via the Q&A feature. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be a dark colored bar and you can click on the Q&A button and ask questions during the presentation. We have pauses built into the presentation, so we will stop periodically throughout to give the opportunity to answer some of the questions that may be in that Q&A feature. The presentation, as well as some exhibits, and eventually this recorded meeting will be available on the North Split website at northsplit.com/landscape. So please feel free to check that out or share that with friends or neighbors who were not able to be here today. We are asking for feedback or comments if you have them. If you have comments or questions that you don't have the opportunity to submit today, please submit those to info@northsplit.com, that email address. And we are requesting all comments and questions by May 27th, which is a week from Friday. So we'll start with some introductions with the presenters that you'll see here this evening. We'll also provide a construction update on the progress that's happened so far on the project. We did want to touch on some of the comments that we received on the Aesthetic and Enhancement Implementation Plan. You may have seen this as the acronym AEIP. We sent that out along with some landscaping plans back last fall, and we wanted to touch on some of the comments that we received from the public and some of the responses to those. Those comments and responses are all also available on the website at northsplit.com/landscape. We're going to touch on some tree removal in some do not disturb areas. We'll talk more about that. We're going to give an update on some proposed project modifications, talk a little bit about new side slope retaining walls that are being proposed, see if we have any more questions, and then we'll adjourn for the evening. Your presenters today are myself. My name is Kia Gillette. I'm part of the North Split project team. I'm the environmental lead, and I'm with a company called HNTB. Also presenting is Seth Schickel. He is the HNTB project manager for the North Split project. And we also have Ron Taylor, who is the aesthetic design lead for the North Split project from TSW Design Group. And now Seth's going to give an update on construction.
Thank you, Kia. Can you hear me okay? Okay. As Kia mentioned, my name is Seth Schickel. I'm the project manager for HNTB, and we're working on behalf of NDOT for the North Split project. Both Kia and I, and Ron as well, have been involved in this project for upwards of 6 years now. We've started the project when it was kind of in a different mindset. It was a planning project. Then we did environmental study, design, and now we're into construction. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the construction that's going on in downtown area on the North Split project. What you can see here is a drone shot with a nice sunrise. Is that sunrise or sunset? That's on the east. So this is looking towards the south. In the foreground, you can see a lot of the construction activity. Some of the ramps are still in place at this time. And then you can kind of see the city there off to the south. I will occasionally during my presentation be saying next. Kelly Scott with HNTB is helping us to move these slides along. So thank you, Kelly, for your help. So next. Thank you. This is just a zoomed in view of one of the bridges, and it happens to be what we call the flyover bridge. It's bridge number 34. You can kind of see that yellow crane is out over bridge number 34. So this is, again, just showing a view of some of the construction in the foreground, just to give you a big picture that it is a massive construction site. I'm sure if you live, work, or use the area, you're familiar with the construction project. Next, Kelly. So this year in May of 2022, we are recognizing that we've had 1 year of full interstate closure. The through movements of I-70 through downtown and I-65 through downtown have been closed for 1 year. And the reason that we closed the interstate movements was to allow for construction to happen in a much shorter time frame, 18 months, as opposed to if we had not closed them, it would have been 3 or 4 years worth of construction. So we're able to condense the construction timeline significantly by closing the interstates, allowing the contractors access to the site. It's not only safer for the contractors and their workers, but also for the traveling public if they're not in a construction zone. There are some movements that are still open. You can still get some places into downtown. Some movements are still open, but the through movements of 65 and 70 through the interstate, through the North Split area are closed. One thing that is open is the Monon Loop. The Monon Loop was built as a detour for the Monon Trail. The Monon Trail runs from 10th Street north through the rest of Indianapolis, and interestingly runs right through the middle, the kind of the heart of the interchange, the North Split interchange. And recognizing that the Monon Trail served quite a few commuters and residents and people, recreational uses, INDOT committed to creating a detour called the Monon Loop. It goes around the north and west side of the interstate interchange, goes over to College, and then connects again over to 10th Street. This was a detour that was put in place so that people could still have access on bike and foot through that area. And actually, this Monon Loop will stay in place when the construction project is done. It will become a city asset that they will maintain, and it will stay open and be called the Monon Loop from here until, well, hopefully beyond when I retire. What you see here is a picture of where the Monon Loop connects to College Avenue on the very north end of the interchange. And you can see some steel sheet piling. That's the thing on the left side of the picture, those metal kind of rusty looking pieces of structure. Those were installed to hold back a slope that serves one of the ramp movements that stayed open. When the project is complete, that ramp will be removed where it is. It's being moved farther infield towards the middle of the interchange. So where that ramp is now, there won't be a ramp. They'll remove that ramp and the dirt, and then those steel sheet piles will be able to come out of the ground. This area will be planted with trees and shrubs. Next slide, please, Kelly. So this is a picture of that big bridge that I showed earlier with the crane hanging over it. Here you can see that same crane, that yellow crane going off at an angle. And what it's doing here is installing those beams. The beams are the parts of a bridge that span between the piers. Piers go into the ground and beams go from span to span. So this beam here is being installed. So all of those beams on the flyover bridge are in place. And we've actually started to install, we've got the majority of the beams for the whole entire project are already in place. They use cranes, and most of this happens at night. Like this is a picture from, let's see, December, when we had some beam settings going, or beams going in. This is commonly the, excuse me, the street underneath will be closed during beam settings. It's unsafe to have traffic or pedestrians walking under the beams. So these we do at night when there's less traffic and less pedestrian traffic. In general, bridge construction is just over 40% complete. I think the number I got was 41% complete for the entire project. Next slide, please, Kelly. Okay, one of the unique items that or construction techniques that we've used on this project is something we call modular bridge construction. So bridge and construction makes sense. What does modular mean? Well, it means that we build parts of the bridge at a time. And part of this is out of necessity. So during the project, during the entire construction of this project, we've had the impacts of a worldwide pandemic, the COVID pandemic. And the way it's impacted our projects is myriad, but one of the most critical ones is that a lot of the supplies that we need, the construction materials that we need, were harder to get. And whether that was because of labor shortages or material shortages that kind of came along with the COVID impacts, we had to kind of adjust and adapt. And one of the ways that our contractors, Superior Construction, adapted is that they recognized, hey, we can still build most of these bridges, just not all of them at the same time. So what you've seen, and in the top left picture here, you can see a picture of the bridge beams built on almost stilts. Actually, Kelly, if you click one more time, I think I have a zoom in. So this is a picture of Michigan Avenue. We're looking to the east right now, and that's the Midland Arts and Antiques, if you're familiar with the building there, the brick building on the kind of the right top of the picture. And you can see some of those beams going across Michigan Avenue, or Michigan Street, excuse me. Those beams are supported on the bridge foundation elements that are sticking into the ground. And in fact, you can see another crane here. That's the big piece of equipment with its crane boom kind of up at an angle. He's driving those piles, the things that go into the ground and hold the bridge up into the ground. Well, we can drive the piles, we can put the beams on, but we couldn't build the retaining walls that support the earth and the road around the bridge because we couldn't get those retaining wall pieces. Those are one of the hardest pieces of construction material to get during the pandemic. So what the contractor did is they decided, well, we'll go ahead and build the bridge pieces that we can, which are those bridge pilings and those bridge beams, and they'll get that all ready. In fact, one more click, please, Kelly. It's a zoomed in picture where they've started to assemble other parts. You can see on the left side of this picture, it kind of looks like gravel. Well, that gravel is the backfill or the road bed that the road will actually be built on. And that's the bridge kind of off to the right-hand side there. So modular bridge construction is building the parts of the bridge that we could when we had those materials. Next slide. Oh, I haven't seen it advance. Oh, there it goes. This is I've got a series of pictures here just showing the bridge progress, again, of that biggest bridge, the one that we call the flyover bridge or structure number 34. What you see in this picture, we're kind of centered over a ramp movement. We're looking to the east right now in this picture, and that is actually 65 southbound headed over to I-70 east. That's where the cars are on the ramp. If you look just about 50 or 60 feet to the right, you can see those piers, those elements that are kind of repeated, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 of them. And that is the start of that bridge where the foundations are coming out of the ground. So next picture, please, Kelly. Now we've got some of those beams. This is it's a sunnier day. We've got those beams going in. You can see a crane in the foreground, again, installing some of the foundation elements. Next picture, I think this is a wintertime picture next. Here we go. We've got some snow and the rest of the beams are up and we've started to put in the formwork. Next picture, Kelly. Here we've started to, this is a little bit different view, but we've got some off to the very right side. You can start to see that bridge, that curved piece is flat on top. That's where we've poured the bridge deck or the riding surface on it. And you can kind of see in the foreground some of those bridge piles going into the ground. And this kind of gives you a good indication of where this is. The soccer park is under the words that say bridge project. That's where the soccer park is up that way. And then final picture here, Kelly. This is a view from right above. We've got drone photography that we're taking every week essentially for this project. This is looking down on that bridge as they're pouring the bridge deck. It gives you a pretty good sense of how wide that bridge is, and then how many people are active on a job site on major project like this. That white thing that looks kind of like a crane in the front, that's a boom or a big arm that the concrete trucks, which you can kind of see on the left side, will feed the concrete up. It gets pumped up onto that bridge and then placed in place by all those workers in that big yellow gantry thing. I think that's the last one of these pictures. Is that right, Kelly? Yeah, okay. So a couple of updates is moving forward. What we're doing this month in May of 2022 is paving on the east and the west legs of the project. And what you're looking at right now, we're looking to the east in this picture, out towards I-70, towards the east side of Indianapolis. You can see Lewis Street and where the Monon Trail will be once we reconstruct it, underneath the bridges and kind of where that crane is in the bottom of the picture. But this shows where we're preparing all of the paving. So off to the right there in kind of that triangular area will all be paved with new pavement to accept these new bridges that are showing up. The same thing is happening on the west leg, which is over towards the old north side and St. Joe. Next picture, please. This is a picture down on the south leg. So now we're at the south end of the project. We're looking at Market Street. And in fact, this picture was taken in March of 2022. It already looks completely different here. There are bridge beams and the bridge deck is being formed and getting ready to pour over Market Street. At this time, you can, if you lean in like I am, you can kind of see the bridge piles sticking out of the ground. Those are those vertical kind of dark pieces that are sticking up, the bridge pilings they're called. But now we've got those covered up and the bridge beams are in place. So as of right now, all of the streets between Market and 10th Street are reopened, except for Ohio Street. That's the one that is next to the railroad that comes underneath the highway there. So Market Street is reopened. Washington has been open the entire time, but New York and Vermont and Michigan and St. Clair and 10th Street are all open. So all the east-west local streets are open. We do anticipate opening the freeway movements. Those are the ones that I mentioned were closed last May. Opening those in November, late November of 2022. That's at the end of this year. I think that's it. So why don't we pause here, see if we had any questions from the Q&A.
Yeah, so far there are no questions that have come in through the question and answer function.
Okay.
But this is kind of the method that we're going to use throughout the presentation. We'll break this into some easily digestible chunks and then take some pauses to answer any questions that get typed in. So maybe wait a minute here, but
Sure.
Right now there are no open questions.
Okay. Yeah, we can wait a minute. We talked about construction activity that had happened to date and then kind of gave an update of what's going to come. The paving operations are pretty significant. We'll have to finish that bridge construction. We've got, like I mentioned, about 60% of the bridge construction to go. Once those bridges are in place, using that modular bridge construction, we can start to build those pavement connections between them, and then traffic will get onto the highway towards the end of this year. Any questions?
Still no questions. So
Okay. All right. Well, we have, as Kia and Ron both mentioned, we have a few opportunities, several more opportunities for Q&A. So if something comes up related to construction, feel free to ask that as it comes to you.
I'm going to jump back in now and talk a little bit about the aesthetics and landscaping plans. We sent out a draft version of the landscaping plans back in November, and I'll talk about some of the maybe popular comments that we received on them. All right, I want to talk really briefly about what Section 106 is. Section 106 is from the National Historic Preservation Act, and it is a consultation process regarding historic properties. And all projects that receive federal funding must go through this Section 106 consultation. What it does at the end of this, if there are adverse effects to historic properties, we have what we call a memorandum of agreement, or an MOA. And that MOA includes mitigation stipulations, so mitigation measures for those adverse effects to the historic properties. And one of the mitigation measures from the MOA was to provide a draft landscape and side slope plan for our consulting parties, who are the people that we consult with who have an interest in historic resources, for their review and comment at 2 points during the design process. Now, that also included a public involvement component. So the first draft of those landscape and side slope plans was sent out back in October of 2021. And we had virtual neighborhood meetings in November of 2021. So now we're at the second part of that commitment, where we send out the revised landscape plans. And we did that in April, and we're having a virtual neighborhood meeting today to update the public on the comments and the responses that we received during the first round. All right, next. So just by the numbers, during the fall, we received 30 individual letters or emails. We had 49 comments or questions at the virtual neighborhood meetings, 87 individual comments on 29 different topics. And some of the more popular topics that we heard about were evergreen trees, adding trees along the Monon Trail and Monon Loop, local street names on interstate bridges, providing a physical barrier between the pedestrians and bicyclists and the motorized traffic under the bridges, bike lanes, and noise. So I'm going to touch on most of these. I'm not going to get into detail on noise because the noise analysis process has been completed for the project. And there is more information available on the North Split website if you have an interest in noise. Also, feel free to email info@northsplit.com if you have noise questions. But just, I guess, the sum of this is we did update those draft landscape plans based on the comments and feedback that we heard during the first round of review. Evergreen trees. This was a pretty popular comment. And the comment essentially was, can you please add some more evergreen trees to the tree mix in the landscape plans? So the project team decided that that was something that we could do. And we're proposing to add 3 species of evergreens along the interstate legs side slopes. So that portion of the interstate that's adjacent to the neighborhoods. We're proposing to add jack pine, eastern red cedar, and Virginia pine. And although these species are not native to this part of central Indiana, they are regionally native to the Midwest. So we are still trying to keep with the theme of native species, just because we think that they are going to have a better survivability when planted. And we are going to add those at a ratio of 1 evergreen tree per every 3 deciduous trees planted, as requested per that comment. Another comment that we received was to add additional trees if we could find space along the Monon Trail. And as Seth mentioned, the Monon Trail is a trail that runs straight through the middle of the interchange. It's currently closed right now. And we're trying to add some trees, and we were able to do that. Along with that comment was to try to minimize the use of turf grass. And by turf grass, we mean short grass that's mowed kind of as a buffer. So what we were able to do was to add some additional shade trees along the Monon. And we also eliminated one of the sides of the buffers. There's a concrete swale proposed in this area that previously had 2 turf grass buffers, one on either side. We've eliminated the side to the west and added native herbaceous plant species as well as trees along the Monon. Next, please. Kind of along that similar train of thought, we were requested to add some additional trees along the Monon Loop. And that Monon Loop is the current detour of the Monon Trail that runs along the north side of the interchange, down south along College, and then to the southeast back to 10th Street. And we were able to find some spots to add some additional trees there. We also had a comment regarding making sure the trees that we were showing on the plans were indeed proposed trees and not existing trees. That was a good comment, and we realized that we had inadvertently proposed some trees on existing trees, and that was not going to work out. So we did remove those symbols where there were existing trees along the Monon Loop. Another comment that we did receive was regarding local street names on the interstate bridges. So our original aesthetic design guidelines included the local street name that you would be traveling on, or the interstate would be crossing over on the interstate bridge. So if this was Central Avenue, it would say Central Avenue on there. The comment we received was to include the neighborhood name that you were entering into. INDOT and Federal Highway have discussed this, and they would prefer to keep it as the street name, more from a simplicity's sake, and to not perhaps inadvertently leave off a neighborhood if you're going towards multiple neighborhoods. However, INDOT recognized this is an important to the community and is willing to sit down with the city of Indianapolis, as well as the Rethink 6570 Coalition, who made the original comment, and discuss this concept further. Another comment that we received, and we received a number of variations of this comment, was to add a physical barrier between the pedestrian and bicycle traffic and the motorized vehicle traffic underneath the bridges along the local streets. This graphic was provided by the Rethink 6570 Coalition. I think this is the Central Avenue Bridge, but it just kind of shows the graphic of what the intent of the comment was. There is that barrier between the bicyclists and the road. NDOT had previously discussed this with the city of Indianapolis, and the city of Indianapolis would be the entity responsible for maintaining them. And right now, these barriers are not included in the North Split project. But like those bridge names, NDOT is willing to sit down with the city as well as the Rethink 6570 Coalition to discuss this concept further. We received quite a number of comments thanking us for adding bike lanes to the project. And I wanted to clarify, those things are not warranted. The North Split project is not adding new bike lanes to the local city streets. If there are existing bike lanes there now, such as at New York or in Michigan, those bike lanes will remain in place, but the project itself is not adding new bike lanes. So we just wanted to make that clear to everyone. Now I'd like to talk about some proposed tree removal in do not disturb areas. And what do not disturb areas are, we had a commitment in our environmental assessment document that identified some do not disturb areas to protect some existing vegetation trees, which would provide visual screening to the interstate, between the interstate and the neighborhoods. What you're looking at here is red is the North Split project area. The North Split is the interchange there in the center. The yellow areas are those do not disturb areas. And there are two areas where adjacent property owners have requested tree removal in do not disturb areas. And we're talking about this because that was a commitment in the environmental document. We want to acknowledge that we're going to remove some trees that we said we weren't going to, and are explaining why. Next, please. So tree removal area 1 is located south of I-65 near 11th and Broadway streets. It's adjacent to the Chatham Arch Historic District. And if you're familiar with this area at all, that tree is adjacent to what used to be an old firehouse that is being refurbished. And the tree is about 8 feet from the structure. And the adjacent property owner has requested that that tree be removed because it is so close to that structure. Next, please. Tree removal area number 2 is in a do not disturb area near College Avenue and 14th Street. It is adjacent to both the Monon Loop Trail and the Old Northside Historic District. There are actually 5 trees in this area that are being proposed for removal. They are Austrian pines, and they are turning brown. And they're likely turning brown because they have a fungus. And this fungus ultimately over time will likely kill these trees. So the property owners had requested that they be removed and this area be replanted with native trees and shrubs. And that's what we're proposing to do.
At this point, we're going to take another quick pause just to see if there's any questions anybody has concerning the second part of the presentation. Right now, we have no open questions that have come in. And just a reminder, if you do have questions from things you're hearing during the presentation, go down to the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen in the center and type in that, and we can make sure to get the appropriate person to answer those questions. So at this time, there are no open questions.
Okay, I'm going to talk about a couple of project modifications that have come up since we started construction, I guess since we started designing construction. So the first of these project modifications is the addition of some pavement patching. Now, the roads in the interstates, I should say, in downtown Indianapolis were built in the 60s and 70s, and the North Split was original construction, all of the materials, and had deteriorated. That's why it was part of the decision that was made to replace it. There is a piece of pavement that's highlighted in this blue hatched area that you can see here that is south of the North Split project area. So at the very top of this map is Washington Street. It runs east and west. And the interstate is the part that's highlighted in blue. What we're proposing to do is to maintain the condition of this pavement by patching it in the blue area. The green areas will also be patched. Those are just indicating that they're ramps. So at the very north part or top of this picture, we've got 2 green ramps that go to Washington Street. And at the south, we have the ramp that goes to Fletcher Avenue. So the proposed work here is to patch the existing pavement, not to replace it, but just to maintain it. All of the work that will be done is within the existing pavement surface. There's no work that will be done outside of the existing pavement. One of the main reasons that we found it valuable to add this to the project is we can take advantage of the existing interstate closure. Because there is no through traffic on 65 or 70, on Interstate 65 or Interstate 70, we have just a small amount of traffic in this project, this part of the project area, and it makes a lot of sense to get this maintenance work done now. Kia told me to say that pavement patching has no potential to cause adverse effects to historic or archaeological resources. Next is a different modification in a similar area to the pavement patching. So let me zoom in real quick. This is an existing railroad bridge that was abandoned 50 years ago. It was, I'm sorry, built 50 years ago and abandoned about 30 years ago. The bridge is about 150 feet south of the Bates Street crossing. Bates Street crosses over the interstate between Pine and I think it's Davidson there. And this bridge, as I mentioned, was built about 50 years ago. It is a steel girder bridge. It's one of the bridges that is painted blue. They painted it, I think, right around the Super Bowl. Recently, INDOT received, or in the past year, INDOT received complaints from nearby property owners about the condition and use of the bridge by kind of folks that were trespassing across the state right-of-way. The proposal here is to remove this abandoned railroad bridge. Same as what Kia mentioned earlier, all of the work is within the existing right-of-way. Again, because we have less traffic on the interstate, we would take advantage of that, and this work would be easier and safer. And again, this does not have the potential to cause adverse effects to either historic or archaeological resources, excuse me. This bridge also has condition issues. I didn't mention that earlier, but because it's 50 years old and has never been maintained and is not in current use by a railroad, the bridge has condition issues too. The other concern with this bridge is that it has the lowest vertical clearance. That's the height underneath the bridge. It has the lowest vertical clearance of any bridge on the interstates in downtown Indianapolis.
All right, we're going to pause again for some questions and answers. Julie was feverishly typing during the last break, and literally as soon as we started talking again, her question popped up. And I think I'll direct this one towards Kia. The question is the city removing the trees on the north side of the new loop?
Yeah, Kelly, I think it might help to show a visual. Could you go back a couple of slides, please, to the Monon, the tree do not disturb. Stop here. So INDOT and the North Split project are proposing to remove the 5 trees that are shown as green circles here, the A, B, C, D, E. They would then be replanted that area in yellow with native trees and shrubs. And Kelly, I'm going to work you here. I need you to go back a couple more slides, please. Keep going. Stop. Nope. One more. Forward. Nope. Keep going the other way. There you go. Stop there. So this shows the Monon Loop. It says the word trail kind of tiny on there. I don't know if you can see that. But the trees that are shown in there as little circles with dots, the larger ones are trees and the smaller circles with dots are shrubs. So those are being proposed to be planted. So we have a lot of trees that are being proposed to be planted along the north side of the Monon Loop. And I know that you specifically asked about the city removing trees on the north side. I don't know. I'm not aware that the city would be removing them or why they would be removing them, but I don't think that they would be removing trees north of the Monon Loop. I hope that addresses the
Kia, would
question.
that be for the construction of the soccer park that they're getting ready to do?
I don't know that.
That's what
I
he's talking
wasn't
about.
aware that they were constructing a new soccer park, but it's possible. The city may be doing something else
Or
on
not a
that.
soccer park, but I thought they were doing some kind of playground or water park over there or something is what I heard.
Yeah, I don't know the plans of that. I don't think they were immediately adjacent to the Monon Loop, but it's possible that they may have to do that.
Okay. Sorry that we missed you the last break there, Julie, but hopefully that answered your question. Are there any other questions before we move on to the next part of the presentation? At this time, I don't see any other open questions.
Okay, we'll move on. I'll talk a little bit about some new side slope retaining walls that are being proposed in the project. Again, we've got a map showing the south end of the project. Towards the bottom of the page is Washington Street, highlighted or kind of outlined in red is the North Split project area that runs north and south in this area. And we've got 5 call out boxes that are pointing to some proposed retaining walls that are, is that a green color, Kia? Kind of a light green color. The proposed retaining walls are within 3 city blocks. So between Michigan and Vermont on both sides of the interstate, between Vermont and New York on both sides of the interstate, and between New York and Ohio on the west side only of the interstate. So again, we've got, it's hard to see on the scale, but, or at least on my screen, we've got areas, 5 different areas where walls are being proposed. These are side slope retaining walls. 2 of these areas that are mentioned with a lot more words there were previously discussed as likely to require retaining walls so that we could avoid those do not disturb areas that Kia talked about earlier. There were some previously planted, neighborhood planted plants or trees there. These walls were required to avoid those trees, to avoid impacting those trees. So really what we're talking about here is on the other side of the highway, on the east side, and then the one on the south side, the south end of the project here. So now let me tell you a little bit about why these walls are being proposed. The original design included reinforced soil slopes. And what you can see here is a picture of a reinforced soil slope on the left side. That slope is constructed with reinforcing that goes into the ground, and then that slope can go up to a 1-to-1 slope. Now, slope means how far over and down something goes. So when we say 1-to-1, I've got this blue line there that shows about a 1-to-1 slope. So over 1 foot, down 1 foot, over 1 foot, down 1 foot. And that's the aim that we're talking about. It's pretty steep. 1-to-1 is pretty steep. And what we have recognized is 2 things that are not great about this design. I'll be honest. One, it is hard to maintain 1-to-1 slopes. So over the course of time, these slopes don't want to stay as slopes. Dirt wants to be flatter than this. So this is my geotechnical engineering class coming out here. Slopes want to be flatter, so they're not going to just start falling apart. They're reinforced to stay in place, but they're hard to maintain. There will be some minor modifications or maintenance that's required over the life of this highway. The other thing that presented a challenge with these steep slopes is that they cannot be planted as well as other parts of the interchange. So you may have heard us refer in the past to an urban forest, and you saw pictures that Kia showed of how many hundreds and hundreds of plants that we'll be placing in the North Split project area. Well, you can't put a plant on a one-to-one slope that is very tall. You can't get trees and shrubs. You can get grasses, and we could still make it visually covered as planted, but the material that we can install there isn't trees and isn't shrubs. So on the next, what we were proposing is what we'll see on the next slide here. We are proposing to put in short, relatively short, side slope retaining walls. So on the left side, you can see where the interstate level is. And if we had a retaining wall, that's the kind of, I guess I'm not sure what that shape is. The vertical element that's a few feet away from the car. It's shown as about 7 feet as a typical height. It is up towards the interstate, so as far away from the side streets as we could get it. And there is a small bench that's flat in front of it just to make it work, to keep the soil in place and keep the retaining wall to work. And outside of that 20-foot clear zone where tree branches don't grow up over the highway, we can start to plant trees. And these slopes are much more gentle, much more gradual. They'll be anywhere, that 1-to-1 that I was talking about earlier, which is again 1 over 1 down. We can get it flatter, like towards a 2-to-1 or even a 3-to-1, like is what's drawn here. So 3-to-1 means 3 feet over, 1 foot down, 3 feet over, 1 foot down. Trees can survive on slopes around 2-to-1 and flatter. So what we're able to do by installing these walls up towards the highway is install more trees on side slope areas where there wouldn't have been trees to begin with. The next picture shows a view looking at the front of this wall. You can again see the interstate level where the car is kind of sketched in as a shadow there, some guardrail, and then that retaining wall. And now these, as it's drawn, we didn't go to the full what these trees will look like 50 years from now. These trees are probably, I don't know, Kia, did we estimate how tall these were? I think if the wall is 7 feet high, these trees look like they're maybe twice that, so 15 feet tall. That's not too far off from what we'll be planting. We're planting, I think, 3-inch trees or 2-inch trees. Thank you, Kia. So the caliper or the diameter of the tree trunk when it will be installed is 2 inches at about chest height. So those trees are maybe a few years after they're planted. Now, obviously the shrubs, the lower plantings, and then the grasses will look like that within a year or two of being planted. So this shows where the retaining walls would be, again, towards the highway. And we're able to plant more trees and shrubs on these side slope areas. In order to install these 3 new retaining walls that we talked about, and I talked about 5 overall, 2 we knew about to avoid the existing trees planted. We do have 1 additional tree that has to be removed in what we call the do not disturb area. That's in order to build this retaining wall and slope out the ground so that we can plant more trees. We have to remove this Callery pear, which is an invasive species. And this one appears to be a volunteer. It was not planted down at the bottom where those neighborhood planted trees were. This is up on the slope closer to the interstate and potentially causes issues anyway as the tree continues to grow. I mentioned earlier, there's a 20-foot buffer. That's the requirement that we have. We can't plant trees within 20 feet of the interstate because branches can grow up and cause a safety issue. This tree is between Vermont Street and New York Street. Kia, do you recall, is it on the east or the west side?
It's on the west side. It's near the do not disturb area, which is on the west side.
Okay, thank you. Because we have to remove this tree in order to install this retaining wall, we will agree to plant 3 native trees to replace it. And those will be planted in the do not disturb area, which is closer down towards the neighborhoods. So we will replace this, in addition to all the other trees that we'll be planting, we'll be able to plant 3 additional trees to replace this one that we have to remove. Kia, I think you told me that Callery pear is the new name for a Bradford pear. Is that right? Okay, I like the new name. Okay, I think that's it for the side slope. Yeah, any questions on the side slope retaining walls?
Right now, we have no open questions.
Okay, we'll keep going and we'll still have an opportunity at the very end if there are additional questions. There are opportunities if you have comments or think of questions later after this presentation. Please feel free to email those to info@northsplit.com. The website with meeting materials and a recording of this meeting, which will likely be posted tomorrow morning, is northsplit.com/landscape. And if you would prefer to mail hard copy comments, those can be sent to attention Kelly Scott at 111 Monument Circle, Suite 1200, Indianapolis, 46204. We do ask that you provide any comments by Friday, May 27th, which is a week from tomorrow. And that's actually 2022. It says 2021. We actually meant this year. If you have general construction related questions or concerns, we would encourage you to contact the NDOT customer service portal, NDOT for You. It's a comprehensive program and you can ask about any project, anything that you see on an NDOT facility. But if it's North Split related, just indicate that. What happens is your inquiry or your comment is then tracked by NDOT and the design build team. And what it does is it ensures that your comment gets addressed in an accurate and timely manner. And you can enter comments at the website if you type in ndot4u.com. There is also a phone number, 855-463-6848, and an email address, ndot@ndot.in.gov. So for any construction related questions or concerns, we encourage you to use NDOT for You. The North Split also has a social media presence. We have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you're looking for updates or interesting tidbits about the project, please check those out. If you would like to receive text updates about the project, you can text North Split to 468-311.
So we have one more opportunity here. Are there any questions looking back or thinking back about the entire presentation tonight? Right now we have no open questions. We do have one comment that has come in from Mary Ann saying, thank you for this update.
You're welcome, Mary Ann.
All right, I'm not seeing any more and we'll let you get back to your evening. Just remember, if you do have questions or comments, please feel free to send them to info@northsplit.com. Thank you all for joining us.